Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, my name is Fatin Wati. I'm student at State Polytechnic of Jember. Today, I want to explain about word for word of translation. For the first is definition. Literal translation, direct translation, or word for word translation is a translation of a text done by translating each word separately, without looking at how the words are used together in a phrase or sentence. In translation theory, another term for literal translation is metaphrase, and for phrase sense translation. Literal translation leads to mistranslating of idiom, which is a serious problem for machine translation. The second is the terms are used in translation studies. There is three types used in translation studies. First is usage. The term literal translation often appeared in the titles of 19th century English translation of classical Bible and other texts. Second is scripts. Word for word translation, scripts, ponies, or truths are sometimes prepared for a writer who is translating word written in language he doesn't know. For example, Robert Pinsky is reported to have used a literal translation in preparing his translation of Dante's Inferno, 1994. Similarly with Richard Piffier work from literal translation provided by his wife, Larissa Volokhonsky, in their translation of several Russian. And the last is poetry to purpose. Literal translation also denotes a translation that represents the precise meaning of the original text but does not attempt to convey its style, beauty, or poetry. There is, however, a great deal of difference between a literal translation of poetic word and a prose translation. A literal translation of poetry may be in prose rather than verse, but also be error-free. Okay, for the third, I want to explain about a bad practice of word-for-word translation. It is often considered a bad practice of conveying word-by-word translation in non-technical text. This usually refers to the mistranslation of idioms that affects the meaning of the text, making it unintelligible. The concept of literal translation may be viewed as an oxymoron or contradiction in terms, given that literal denotes something existing without interpretation, whereas on translation, by its very nature, is an interpretation or an interpretation of the meaning of words from one language into another. And for the fourth is advantage and disadvantage of word-for-word translation. Word-for-word translation or literal translation is the rendering of text from one language to another one word at fine with or without conveying the sense of the original text. In translation studies, literal translation is often associated with scientific, technical, technological, or legal texts. The fifth is machine translation. For example, is Google Translate. Early machine translation were famous for this type of translation because they simply created a database of words and their translation. Later, attempts utilized common phrase which resulted in better grammatical structure and capture of idioms but with many words left in the original language. The system that we use nowadays are based on a combination of technologies and apply algorithms to correct the natural sound of the translation. However, professional translation agencies that use machine translation create a raw translation first that is then tweaked by a professional translator. And the last is mistakes and jokes. Literal translation of idiom results quite often in jokes and amusement among translators, and not only. The following famous example has often been told both in the context of translators and that of machine translator. When the sentence "the spirit are willing, but the flesh is weak" was translated into Russian and then back to English, the result was "the vodka is good, but the meat is rotten." This is generally believed to be simply an amusing story and not a factual reference to an actual machine translation error. Okay, I think enough for my explanation about word for word translation. Thank you and see you next time. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bye bye.